I want us to think about what it is to be perfect. I believe that what we will find is that God has a far different standard about being perfect than what we do. Have you ever known anybody who was a perfectionist?
I am.
You're not going to like this next sentence.
Raised your hand too early.
Such a person is hard to live with.
That's why I'm alone.
We're not talking about people who seek after excellence. That's different from perfectionism. In the British Museum in London, there is a final draft of a literary masterpiece. It was Thomas Gray's masterpiece called The Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. And lovers of English literature marvel at how every word in that poem is so perfect, just like it was chosen exactly for where it is located in the poem and for its meaning. And it really was. Gray wasn't satisfied with his first draft, so he rewrote it. It's kind of like I do on sermons. I start writing on Monday, and I finish up by getting up about 5 to 5:30 Sunday morning and rewriting it all over again after doing it every day. But Gray wrote his poem twice, then he wrote it a third time, and he continued rewriting his poem for 8 years. And with all of that polishing, he never considered the poem complete. And in the museum, you can see each successive copy of his carefully penned poem written by hand, all 75 drafts. That is a commitment to excellence. But that's different from perfectionism. You see, with a perfectionist, sorry about this, we're talking about people who would never begin a poem in the first place because they know it could never be as perfect as they would want it to be. Perfectionists are people who strain compulsively toward impossible goals, and they measure their self-worth entirely in their self-achievements. And as a result, according to Dr. Burns, David Burns, they are terrified by the prospect of failure. They feel driven and at the same time unrewarded by their accomplishments. They are most unhappy people. Sadly, many people confuse such compulsiveness with Christianity. They take Jesus' words to be perfect, even as our Heavenly Father is perfect, to mean that we are without a flaw. Or to be Christian, we have to be without a flaw. And if we're not, we need a big-time guilt trip about that. They forget that if it were possible for us to be flawless, Jesus would never have needed to go to the cross to begin with. It is heresy to expect such perfection in the world. Jesus doubtless really means by that statement that we should be perfect in our love, even as God's love is perfect. You know, some of us may not like some of the cute religious bumper stickers that we see around, but there is one that really is right on target. And that is the one that says Christians are not perfect, only forgiven. And that is right on target. Christians are not perfect, only forgiven. Christians are not perfect, even the best of us, but we are all forgiven. That is why the Christ child came into this world. And that's what we celebrate in a little over about 12 days. Christmas, I submit, is better than perfect. The Christ child would have no reason to come into a perfect world. Consider his birth. It was not exactly the kind of birth that we would have planned for the King of Kings. There was an interesting article in Money magazine some time back, and it ranked the various cities around the country as the best to live in and the worst to live in. And it ranked the area around Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, dead last in desirability of the 300 places which they surveyed in the United States. Gee, never seemed so bad to me, one of the local ladies at a fair said as she was interviewed. The mayor of Allentown, which is a city nearby Bethlehem, said, you know, Lee Iacocca's mother still lives here. You think Lee Iacocca would allow his mother to stay in a town that wasn't fit to live in? I don't know too many people who would rather live in Philadelphia or New York, the Chamber of Commerce exec at Bethlehem exclaimed. And the newspaper said, what a remarkable coincidence. At the same time, Money magazine came out saying how bad we were considering that Money magazine was the worst magazine in America. The reason the magazine rated Bethlehem so low was due to its economic insecurities. Well, the point of this is, if Bethlehem, Pennsylvania rated 300, I would hate to think where Bethlehem of Judea would rank. If you were to rank the perfect place for the King of Kings to be born, I doubt that Bethlehem would even make your list. Oh, little town of Bethlehem, we sing. And Bethlehem was a little town. It had a rich tradition, but it was so far removed from the centers of influence and power in the world of its day. There was really little to recommend Bethlehem for the birthplace of the Messiah. But it was more than perfect for God. God seems to have a different standard for perfection than we have. Bethlehem was the hometown of God's servant David. And as we know, David was far from a perfect man as we measure men. Yet he was called a man after God's own heart. God must be looking for something more than perfection. And that's the whole point of the Christmas story. Christmas is not about perfection. Have you ever tried to keep a perfect house when a baby is in residence there? No. When there is a baby in the house, we forget all about perfection and we think about love. And that's what Christmas is about. Harry Reasoner, some of you may remember, was on TV's 60 Minutes program, and he is no longer with us. But years ago, he wrote something that I think is interesting about Christmas. Harry also believed that there was something about Christmas that goes beyond perfection, even beyond logic. It's worth repeating his words this morning as we continue preparing ourselves to celebrate Christ's coming into the world. Reasoner wrote, "The basis for this tremendous burst of buying things and gift-giving parties and near hysteria is an event that Christians believe happened a long time ago. You can say that in all societies there has always been a midwinter festival, and that many of the trappings for our Christmas are almost violently pagan. But you come back to the central fact of the day, the birth of God on earth. It leaves you only 3 ways of accepting Christmas. One is cynically, as a time to make money or endorse the making of it. One is graciously, which he says is the appropriate attitude for non-Christians who wish their fellow citizens all their joys their beliefs entitle them to. And third, of course, is reverently. If this is the anniversary of the appearance of the Lord of the universe in the form of a helpless babe, Reasoner reasons, it is a very important day. It's a startling idea, of course. The whole story that a virgin was selected by God to bear a son as a way of showing his love and concern for man. It's my guess, he says, in spite of all the lip service given to it, it is not an idea that has been popular with theologians. It is a somewhat illogical idea, and theologians like logic almost as much as they like God. It's so revolutionary an idea that it probably could only have come from a God that is beyond logic and beyond theology. It has magnificent appeal. Nobody has seen God, and almost nobody has any real idea of what he is like. And the truth is that among men, the idea of seeing God suddenly and standing in a very bright light is not necessarily a completely comforting and appealing idea. But everybody has seen babies, and most people like babies. If God wanted to be loved as well as feared, he moved correctly. For a baby growing up learns all about people. If God wanted to be intimately a part of man, he moved correctly. For the experience of birth and familyhood is the most intimate and precious experience. So it comes beyond logic, Reasoner concludes. It is either a falsehood or it is the truest thing in the world. It is the story of the great innocence of God in the baby. God in the person of a man has such a dramatic shock toward the heart that if it is not true for Christians, nothing is true. So, if a Christian is touched, or somebody is touched by the Christian story only once a year, the touching is still worth it. And maybe, just maybe on some given Christmas, some final quiet morning, the touch will take. Maybe this Christmas will take on someone this year. Maybe they won't have a perfect Christmas. Maybe it'll even be far better than that. Maybe they will see right to the heart of this sacred event to the God who seeks not perfection, but love. Amen.